Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you. The house was quiet, but the fear inside was loud. A family was trapped in a room, holding their breath, hoping the locked door would keep them safe. Then, a gunshot. The lock shattered. Someone fell. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Whoever was inside wasn't in a rush. This wasn't a random break-in. It was planned. By morning, police arrived to find a crime scene that didn't make sense. It looked like a robbery, but nothing was stolen. The signs pointed to one person, but the real question was, who was really in control? As detectives searched for answers, they realized this wasn't just about love, jealousy, or even revenge. Someone had pulled all the strings, and by the time the truth came out, it was more shocking than anyone expected. Nathaniel Huey Jr. was born around 1993 into an environment where crime and violence were the norm. From childhood, Nathaniel exhibited a reckless and defiant nature. School never interested him. He frequently fought with classmates, challenged authority, and ignored academics altogether. His first encounter with law enforcement came in his teenage years when he was caught participating in a robbery. However, due to his age, he avoided severe consequences. It didn't take long for him to realize that a life of crime provided more than just an adrenaline rush. It also offered financial gain. His offenses escalated, and by 2016, he found himself behind bars for assault. A year later, he was arrested again for driving under the influence. But what truly fascinated Nathaniel was weaponry. He amassed a collection of firearms, frequently showcasing them on social media. His online presence was filled with images of handguns, rifles, and ammunition, attracting the attention of law enforcement. Eventually, the courts banned him from possessing firearms, but Nathaniel had no intention of complying. Instead, he turned to the black market, acquiring weapons through illegal means. Despite his criminal record, he attempted to present himself as a legitimate businessman. He launched a private security company, though it operated without proper licensing. Legally, he wasn't even allowed to carry a weapon, yet he flaunted his supposed authority on social media, posting images of himself in tactical gear, heavily armed. On the other side of the story was Irmelinda Palomo, born on February 3, 1973. By the time she met Nathaniel, she was a fiercely independent woman, a mother of 5, and already a grandmother. Her upbringing had been relatively stable, though her personal life had been filled with struggles. She had married young, but the relationship ended, leaving her to raise her children alone. Determined to provide for them, she worked multiple jobs, balancing the responsibilities of both a mother and a grandmother. She was strict with her family, earning both respect and occasional resentment. When she crossed paths with Nathaniel, those around her struggled to understand the connection. He was 20 years younger, had a volatile history, and embodied the kind of chaos she had spent her life avoiding. Some claim they met through mutual friends, But regardless of how it happened, their relationship progressed quickly. At first, Ermelinda dismissed him, but his confidence, persistence, and dangerous charm pulled her in. For Nathaniel, she was a source of stability, someone who offered him a sense of security he had never known. For her, it was something new, an experience that gave her the illusion of control over a man who lived recklessly. Their bond was unconventional, an attraction built on stark differences. Before long, they moved in together, and Ermelinda's children and grandchildren shared the same crowded space. Yet, their home was far from harmonious. Nathaniel's obsession with weapons never faded. Despite legal restrictions, he continued to acquire and display firearms, making under-the-table deals and exploiting legal loopholes. Guns were more than a collection to him. They were an extension of his identity. He carried a weapon at all times, even inside the house, often dismantling and cleaning his firearms at the kitchen table. Ermelinda initially overlooked this behavior. She cared more about the money he brought in than the legality of his business. But over time, she noticed that his interests weren't just financial. Nathaniel was unpredictable. His temper flared over the smallest inconveniences, a misplaced word, an unwelcome glance. He could go from seething anger to eerie calm in seconds, as if nothing had happened. The first person to voice concern was Christina, one of Ermelinda's daughters. Unlike others who ignored the warning signs, she saw Nathaniel for what he was: dangerous. She watched how he spoke about violence, how he carried himself with arrogance, how he refused to be contradicted. But what frightened her most was how easily he could lose control. By 2021, Nathaniel and Ermelinda had lived together for 6 years. Outwardly, things seemed stable, but the foundation of their relationship had long since crumbled. Nathaniel had never been faithful, but his affairs had now become routine. He used social media to meet new women, engaged in secret conversations, and erased his messages meticulously. He often left late at night, offering vague excuses about work or business meetings. Ermelinda would wake in the middle of the night, only to find him gone. By dawn, he'd return without explanation. Nathaniel never worried about being caught. He assumed Ermelinda either wouldn't find out or wouldn't dare confront him. He believed he held all the power, but he underestimated her. At first, Ermelinda ignored the red flags, but soon, the pattern became impossible to dismiss. The late nights, the hidden messages, his sudden concern with his appearance. It all pointed to something she couldn't ignore. Her suspicions were confirmed the moment she saw a message pop up on his phone. It left no room for doubt. Instead of reacting immediately, Ermelinda decided to gather proof. If Nathaniel thought he was untouchable, he was about to learn otherwise. She started watching him more closely, tracking his movements, paying attention to his habits, even checking his messages when he wasn't looking. Soon, she could tell when he was lying, when he was covering his tracks, when he was slipping away for yet another secret meeting. The more she uncovered, the deeper her anger grew. She saw two paths ahead: leave him and erase him from her life, or make him regret every single choice that led him to this point. And the more she thought about it, the clearer it became. She wasn't going to be just another woman he discarded. If she wanted to hurt him, she needed to do it smartly. Instead of an explosive argument, she chose a different tactic. She would make him feel trapped. She would turn his own world against him. The first step was deception. Ermelinda created fake social media accounts, carefully selecting photos, fabricating identities, and crafting believable personas. She studied online scams, learning the tricks used to manipulate and deceive. She learned the language of threats, the hierarchy of underground networks, and the techniques of psychological warfare. But her most valuable weapon was information. She figured out how to track locations, access hidden data, and manipulate the digital world in ways Nathaniel wouldn't see coming. Then she set her plan in motion. The first contact came from a woman who appeared to be deeply interested in Nathaniel. As expected, he took the bait. He responded eagerly, unaware that he was falling into Ermelinda's trap. At first, their messages seemed harmless, nothing more than casual flirtation. But then she started dropping hints, small details about his life that she shouldn't have known. She let him believe that someone was watching him, keeping track of his movements. Then came the moment that sent his paranoia spiraling, one simple message with his real-time location. Nathaniel was rattled. Ermelinda could see it in his face, in the way he started glancing over his shoulder, double-checking his surroundings. But she was far from finished. The next wave of deception introduced new players. Nathaniel started receiving messages from different people, some threatening, others pretending to offer protection. They reached out from different platforms, different numbers, never following a predictable pattern. Some demanded money, others warned him to stay away from certain places. A few hinted that he was already too deep into something far bigger than himself. None of it made sense to him, but that was the point. His behavior changed almost overnight. He became restless, anxious. He avoided answering unknown calls, constantly checked his surroundings, and even asked Ermelinda to drive him places just to make sure he wasn't being followed. He changed his passwords, deleted messages, anything to shake off the invisible threat he couldn't understand. But the more he tried to escape it, the deeper he fell into Ermelinda's trap. She watched with satisfaction as paranoia took hold of him. What he didn't realize was that the real threat was living under the same roof. Then, in May 2023, someone else entered the picture. Zoraida. She was one of Nathaniel's co-workers, a woman whose life was already tangled in its own web of secrets. Married with 2 children, Zoraida wasn't content in her home life. Infidelity wasn't new to her. She had strayed before and didn't feel guilty about it. To her, personal happiness was more important than loyalty. Nathaniel saw her as an escape, something fresh and exciting. His relationship with Ermelinda was not working, and Zoraida gave him the thrill he craved. It started with stolen glances, then hushed conversations, and soon they were wrapped up in something neither of them cared to stop. Ermelinda had been monitoring Nathaniel long enough to notice when his behavior changed. At first she thought Zoraida was just another fleeting affair, but then she saw the messages. They weren't just flirting. They were making promises. Nathaniel told Zoraida he loved her, that he wanted a future with her. Zoraida said the same. They fantasized about running away together, creating a new life, one without Ermelinda. Reading those words, Ermelinda felt something she hadn't before. This wasn't just betrayal. This was humiliation. She had spent months making him believe he was under attack. And yet, despite all of it, he was still out there, chasing after another woman, living his life as if none of her efforts had mattered. Now, she needed to destroy him. She intensified the psychological torment, introducing even more terrifying figures into Nathaniel's world. He was no longer just being watched, he was being hunted. Nathaniel had been through too much to be afraid anymore. He had survived the worst of it, or so he believed. The only thing that mattered to him anymore was Zoraida. Walking away from her wasn't an option. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just covering up an affair, he was fighting for it. Ermelinda saw the shift in him. If she couldn't break Nathaniel directly, she would destroy Zoraida instead. Her first move was to shake the foundation of Zoraida's home. Using her network of fabricated accounts, she reached out to Zoraida's husband, Alberto. At first, she planted subtle doubts, anonymous messages hinting at betrayal. She even attached photos of Zoraida and Nathaniel together, making sure there was no room for misinterpretation. But Alberto wasn't easily provoked. He brushed off the warnings, unwilling to believe his wife could betray him so brazenly. That was when Ermelinda escalated her tactics. The next wave of messages wasn't just about infidelity, it was about danger. This time, the threats were direct. Letters arrived at their home, unsigned but clear. If he didn't take action, his family would suffer. Alberto started watching Zoraida more closely. The unease inside their home was exactly what Ermelinda had planned for. Yet, Nathaniel still wouldn't let go. Even as paranoia crept into his life, he clung to Zoraida like she was his last lifeline. Now, Linda made him believe that Zoraida was the one feeding the people who were spying on him with information. She carefully pieced together a story so convincing that even he had to question what was real. Using her fake accounts, she sent messages from fabricated informants, each one hinting at the same thing. Zoraida wasn't just some woman he had fallen for. She was working against him. She was the reason the threats kept coming. The paranoia finally consumed him. Nathaniel confronted Ermelinda with his suspicions, and she played her role perfectly. She acted hesitant at first, then reluctantly admitted that she too had been warned about Zoraida. Nathaniel couldn't ignore it anymore. The only way to survive was to act. Then came the final test of loyalty. Ermelinda let him believe that his so-called enemies were watching his every move, and they needed proof that he wasn't compromised. There was only one way to prove he wasn't a traitor. The choice was his. By the time Nathaniel made his decision, there was no hesitation left in him. There was no fear, no regret, only a cold, calculated determination to do what had to be done. The planning began immediately. Nathaniel approached the situation like a mission. He studied Zoraida's habits, tracking her schedule and pinpointing when she was most vulnerable. He took note of when Alberto was home, when the children were asleep, when the house would be easiest to enter. He mapped out possible escape routes, watching for surveillance cameras, memorizing the neighborhood's layout. At the same time, he prepared his supplies. He already had a stockpile of weapons, but he gathered other tools, clothing to blend into the night, gloves to avoid leaving prints, tape, a flashlight. He and Ermelinda shopped together, selecting items carefully, making sure no one would suspect a thing. Ermelinda stayed in the background, never directly involved, but always guiding him in the right direction. By the time everything was in place, Nathaniel had stopped thinking about consequences. The night arrived. Ermelinda remained eerily calm as she drove toward Zoraida's house. She acted like it was just another night, even asking Nathaniel why he needed to go there, though she already knew the answer. He didn't respond. He didn't care what she thought anymore. All that mattered was the task ahead. When they reached the house, Ermelinda stayed in the car while Nathaniel stepped out. The front door was locked, just as he expected. He moved silently around the side of the house, found a window, and shattered the glass. The noise jolted Alberto awake. He sat up, listening. Then, he got out of bed and moved cautiously toward the sound. Nathaniel was already inside. The moment Alberto turned the corner, Nathaniel fired, but his aim was off. The bullet missed. Realizing instantly that this wasn't just a break-in, Alberto turned and ran, sprinting toward the hallway, desperate to reach his family's room before the intruder could. But Nathaniel was faster. The gunshots echoed through the house. Alberto collapsed before he could reach the door. For a few seconds, everything was silent. The first gunshot shattered the silence, sending Zoraida into a panic. Without thinking, she bolted toward the bedroom, dragging her children with her, slamming the door shut and locking it. Nathaniel was inside the house. She didn't know how many others were with him. She only knew she had to keep her family safe. Nathaniel reached the door moments later, slamming his shoulder against it, trying to force it open. It held firm. Frustrated, he took a step back, raised his gun, and fired at the lock. The bullet tore through the wood. On the other side, Zoraida gasped as the impact struck her. Her body stiffened, then she slumped forward. The door swung open. The children clung to each other, eyes wide with terror. The last sounds the neighbors heard were short, muffled gunshots. It was over in minutes. Nathaniel surveyed the scene, his breath steadying. Then he moved methodically, overturning furniture, pulling drawers open, scattering valuables onto the floor, staging the crime to look like a botched robbery. When he was done, he stepped over the bodies and walked back out into the night. Ermelinda was waiting in the car. She didn't ask how it went. She didn't have to. Without a word, they drove away, leaving chaos behind. The gunfire had woken the neighborhood. A few minutes passed before someone worked up the courage to dial 911. Within minutes, sirens filled the street. Officers arrived to find shattered glass, a broken door, and the unmistakable signs of forced entry. Inside, the bodies told a story far more sinister than a robbery gone wrong. Nathaniel had made mistakes, sloppy ones. Nothing valuable had been taken. The scattered belongings were just a weak attempt at deception. It was clear that this wasn't about theft. This was targeted, intentional. By sunrise, detectives were already tracing the crime back to the one person with a motive, Nathaniel Huey. Everyone at Zoraida's workplace knew about their affair. They hadn't exactly been discreet. The deeper detectives dug, the worse it got for Nathaniel. His past was riddled with crimes, assaults, illegal dealings, an arsenal of weapons. While police worked to gather evidence, Ermelinda kept playing her role. She continued messaging Nathaniel, still hiding behind the identities she had created. She reassured him that everything was under control, that the mafia was looking out for him, that as long as he followed instructions, he would remain safe. He believed her. But the investigation was moving faster than Ermelinda had expected. They combed through Nathaniel's recent activity, dissecting every call, every email, every text. One detail stood out. Over the past few months, he had been bombarded with anonymous threats, warnings of danger, claims that he was being hunted. Yet every single one of those messages had come from recently created accounts. If this was a true mafia operation, why did the evidence point solely to Nathaniel? The deeper they looked, the more the threats appeared staged, as if someone had been crafting a false reality just for him. That was the moment the investigation shifted. Nathaniel, meanwhile, was spiraling. He knew the police were closing in. He started noticing unmarked cars following him, strangers watching him too closely. He convinced himself that the mafia was still out there, waiting for him to make a mistake. He believed they would protect him. Desperate, he reached out to the only person he thought he could trust, his mother. He begged her for help, told her he was being accused of something terrible, that he needed to disappear. She refused to help him. Nathaniel had nowhere left to run. For a few days he managed to stay hidden, but security cameras eventually caught him in a grocery store. A manhunt began. Patrol cars swarmed the area, but by the time officers arrived, Nathaniel and Ermelinda had already slipped onto the highway. The chase was on. For miles, police followed, sirens blaring, but Nathaniel had no intention of stopping. He gripped the wheel, pushing the car faster, weaving through traffic, desperate to escape. She had orchestrated every move leading up to this moment, and now she was watching it all unfold exactly as she had planned. Up ahead, traffic thickened. Nathaniel tried to swerve around a truck, but his grip slipped. The tires screeched against the pavement. The car spun out of control, smashing into the guardrail, flipping multiple times before coming to a violent stop. Officers surrounded the wreckage, weapons drawn. Nathaniel was slumped in the driver's seat, a gun in his hand. Ermelinda was beside him, motionless. At some point in those final moments, he had turned the weapon on her, and then on himself. Investigators combed through the wreckage, trying to piece together what had happened in that car. Had he figured it out? The case didn't end there. Detectives turned their focus to Ermelinda's devices. Buried within her files were thousands of messages, chat logs, and notes detailing her manipulation of Nathaniel. Dozens of fake accounts, meticulously created and controlled. She had built this from the ground up. She had studied how to break a person's mind, how to weave fear so tightly around them that they would do anything to escape it. And it had worked. Nathaniel had never been hunted. There had never been a mafia. The real enemy had been sitting beside him the whole time. In the end, the case was closed. But the biggest question remained unanswered. Had Nathaniel figured it out before he pulled the trigger? Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.